Hey, what's up everybody and welcome back to News Dose, and by definition, Black Friday is technically today, though honestly I think by this point it doesn't really matter. Those discounts have been active for a good long week by this point. Happy hunting to everybody though, but regardless, we do have some stuff to get into today. Interestingly enough, we might only be 2 years into this generation, but we might have actually gotten our first glimpse into when we'll get the PlayStation 6 and whatever the next Xbox is called. Yeah, we're already hearing about next generation consoles, and it might be a little secretive going forward. Then also the CMA is launching a new investigation that is almost ironic considering what's happening with Xbox and Activision Blizzard. This could have some ramifications for Xbox though, and it actually kind of seems like this could bode well for them, so we'll touch up on that as well. As always though, before we get started, do hit those buttons below, like, subscribe, and do ring that bell for more content just like this. With that said though, let's just go and jump right into it, starting off with an interesting possibility. Of course, God of War Ragnarok, that just released. It's an amazing game, no doubt about it, but now that it's finished up, what's this team within Sony Santa Monica going to do next? Are they going to go ahead and shift over to other projects? Based on what we heard last week, they do have various projects in development, so that's a possibility. We also know that Cory Barlog has been directing his own game for years, so could they move on over to that project? Well, maybe, but there's also another possibility here. Let's just go and call this a hidden door, if you will, because the God of War Ragnarok director, Eric Williams, during a Kinda Funny Games podcast said he'd like to work on a Castlevania game so long as Konami would be willing to license it out to them. He actually called for fans to help and went on to say, "You guys can make it happen because you have the audience of the world here. I don't know what I'm going to do next, but if somebody gives me that Castlevania license, we would love to make that." So, I mean, I know fans have been wanting a new Castlevania game for a very, very long time. And while even if he's just joking here, this could actually be a winning combination. I mean, a new Castlevania from the studio that's produced 2 Game of the Year contenders back to back? Yeah, that sounds pretty good to me. And even though the possibility of this happening is probably a bit of a long stretch, Konami does seem to be more open to licensing out their games. As we already saw, they're doing that with Silent Hill, and there are also rumors that they might be doing something similar with Metal Gear Solid, and actually, for that matter, Castlevania as well. Of course, those are just rumors for the time being, but all I'm trying to say is that you never really know. I mean, I wouldn't go in expecting this or anything, but let me know what you all think about all this. Would you be interested in a new Castlevania game developed by Sony Santa Monica? Let me know in the comments below. Now, next up here, we have a little bit of a controversy for Callisto Protocol. This game is set to release next month on December 2nd. Yeah, it's right around the corner, and I think it looks excellent so far. I think it has potential of being a really good horror game, and it comes from the Dead Space creator, Glenn Schofield, after all. So, I mean, that's already a good sign, and I think that it looks horrifying, it looks brutal, atmospheric, and pretty much everything that you'd want from a horror game like this. However, much like a lot of other modern games anymore, Callisto Protocol does also have a season pass. And that doesn't always sit well with fans, because it is often believed that games hold content back just so they can charge players more money to get the full experience. So they already have a polarizing reputation, I guess you can say. But this season pass will include pretty much most of what you'd expect. There's new story DLC coming, there's new game modes, new areas to explore. But one thing in particular seems to have caught a lot of attention online, and that is that it says it has extra death animations. Apparently there will be 12 new death animations if you get the season pass. And that there seems to spark some controversy. Now, we talked about this a little earlier in the year with Splatoon 3, but the problem with announcing this type of stuff before release, it's just not a good look. I mean, people are already spending that $70 premium price on a game, and before it even releases, here you have these developers announcing more content that consumers have to pay for. It just kind of puts a bad taste in fans' mouths, and it makes it look like that content was indeed held back for the season pass. Well, Glenn Schofield did respond to this criticism by clarifying the situation on Twitter by saying this: "To be clear, we're not holding anything back from the main game for the season pass. We haven't even started work on this content yet. It's all new stuff that we'll be working on the new year. Fans have asked for even more deaths, so we're making it a priority next year." So there you have it. Based on his response here, it does sound like this will be completely new stuff rather than just being held back content. So that might make some fans feel a little bit better about the overall situation if you do buy into these season passes. I am kind of curious though, how do you feel about season passes, and do you typically pick them up at launch? Now, we do also have a story that revolves around Google and Apple, but the reason that we're going to talk about this today is because it could have some ramifications on the Activision Blizzard acquisition. So what's happening here is that the CMA is launching an investigation into Apple and Google for their stronghold within the mobile ecosystem. The CMA believes that they have an effective duopoly and said this: browsers are one of the most important and widely used apps on mobile devices. Most people use their browsers at least daily to access online content such as information, news, videos, and shopping. 97% of all mobile web browsing in the UK in 2021 happens on browsers powered by either Apple's or Google's browser engine. So any restrictions on these engines can have a major impact on users' experiences. Computer games are a multi-billion-pound industry in the UK, played by millions of people. There are already more than 800,000 users of cloud gaming services in the UK, but restrictions on their distribution on mobile devices could hamper growth in this sector, meaning UK gamers miss out. Now, the reason all this is important is because the timing of all this is highly ironic, and I don't think that this is by accident. See, what's happening here is that these regulators are starting to learn a lot more about the game industry, thanks to the nearly $69 billion Activision Blizzard acquisition. And I think a few things like this have come up as a little alarming to them. I don't think that they necessarily understood this until now, but as these regulators have been forced to take a deeper dive into the industry, we have seen that they are looking beyond just console gaming. They've brought up concerns with mobile gaming. We've seen them talk about PC operating systems. They're looking into subscription services and also cloud gaming. And that here is what they're referring to. Again, I think that all of this is just completely new information to them, so this is just kind of hitting them all at once. But they are starting to see that Google and Apple are dominant when it comes to mobile devices. We already know that, but there's also been cases where they've blocked services like Xbox Cloud Gaming, as that could be viewed as a competing store for them. I'm sure that Microsoft has pointed that out to them. Now, Apple's response to all of this, though, is with respect to cloud gaming, Apple does not prevent cloud gaming apps from appearing on the App Store, nor is it trying to block the emergence of cloud gaming apps. On the contrary, Apple has worked with developers specifically to allow them to offer cloud gaming apps whilst maintaining adequate protection for consumers. Now, I don't know if that necessarily holds up, but, Apple, they're definitely denying everything. But even then, the CMA, they're looking into this situation, and they are now set to investigate all of this, which that'll be interesting to follow. But why all this is so amusing is that you do have the CMA concerned with Microsoft and mobile. Now, as Microsoft has pointed out before, you don't really have to look all that far to figure out that they're basically non-existent in the mobile space right now. Mobile gaming, console gaming, and PC gaming, they're all quite a bit different, and yeah, Microsoft's pretty non-existent when it comes to mobile, and that really seems to be what the CMA has kind of discovered here, hence the investigation. So the way I kind of look at this is that you have the CMA concerned with Microsoft and mobile, but as they were looking to that, they kind of discovered that, hey, Microsoft might actually be right here after all, and they found out that there might be a little bit of a duopoly happening here with Google and Apple. So this new investigation, it does kind of contradict that concern with Microsoft and mobile, and that there is exactly what bodes well for the Activision Blizzard buyout. Microsoft has stated on several occasions one of the main reasons that they want to buy Activision is because of King and their expertise within mobile. It also sounds like Microsoft wants to make their own mobile store, and with all that content that comes included with Activision Blizzard, that will certainly help out a lot here, especially with the inclusion of Call of Duty. So I think with the CMA looking into the mobile market now, and we are seeing that they're investigating Google and Apple, this could actually lean into passing the Activision Blizzard acquisition, as it could help in getting rid of what they consider a duopoly. Of course, this is just speculation, but I thought this was rather interesting just considering the timing and everything. All right, now speaking of Activision Blizzard, the CMA did make some of Microsoft and Sony's statements public, which has given us, I'd say, a lot of juicy information. On one side, you have Sony accusing Xbox of basically wanting to become more like PlayStation. I guess they're concerned Microsoft could raise prices of their games and consoles, kind of like Sony already did. We're I guess, just supposed to kind of ignore that. Microsoft, meanwhile, they're downplaying Call of Duty's relevance, and it's just really this whole back and forth by this point. But we also got some new information for the PlayStation 6 and the Xbox Z, the 720, or whatever you want to call their next console. But both PlayStation and Xbox seems to suggest that the next generation could start right around 2028 at the earliest. Now, I don't think that this is particularly overly surprising. That would mean that the Xbox Series and the PlayStation 5 would be around for about 8 years before next generation starts. And that seems to be about right. That's the typical timeline for them. The PlayStation 4 and the Xbox One, that was a 7-year life cycle. And then the Xbox 360 and the PlayStation 3, that was an 8-year life cycle for the Xbox 360 and a 7-year life cycle for the PlayStation 3. So this kind of follows that timeline as well. Really no big surprise here. But it is interesting to hear about something like this so early in a generation, even if they didn't publicly want it to be known. I mean, we're still getting cross-generation games and everything. I think for me, though, I like this news because it just kind of assures you that it's going to be a long generation. So just kind of sit tight and enjoy it. You don't have to worry about a console coming out in the next couple years. It's going to be a while. And I mean, if you think about it, we really haven't even gotten started this generation. Of course, there's all these questions about cross-generation games holding back this generation. Fans are a little concerned about that. But I mean, we still haven't even gotten to that point where we get all of those Unreal Engine 5 games. We really are just getting started. So we're going to see some drastic improvements over the next few years. One thing that I am kind of monitoring, though, is the inclusion of physical media. As a collector myself, I personally buy physical games, but there's no doubt about it. Digital is on the rise, and now that Sony and Xbox has digital-only consoles, I do wonder if the PlayStation 6 and Xbox, I wonder if they will include a physical disc drive. That is a question going forward, especially if they continue to have a lot of success with these digital-only consoles. Now, that's kind of what I wonder about right now, but there is also a rumor going around that PlayStation might be releasing a new console next year, but with a detachable disc drive. So that's also a possibility going forward. We could start to see these consoles that has a detachable disc drive where you kind of get the best of both worlds. If you like physical media, as I do, you can buy that disc drive, but otherwise, you can just stick with a digital-only console. I mean, I guess we'll just have to kind of wait and see. A lot of things can change between now and 2028 when these consoles might eventually release. Let's go take a look at the poll of the day, though. And of course, I asked you all about Xbox earlier this week. I asked you about PlayStation, so now it's Nintendo's turn. I asked you all, what is your favorite first-party Nintendo controller? Now, Nintendo, they have a lot of different controllers, so unfortunately, YouTube only gives me 5 choices that I can work with, so I couldn't include all of them. But out of the ones that I could include, as you can see here, the Switch Pro did win this one with 46% of the votes. 30% for the GameCube. I mean, you gotta love the legendary GameCube controller. Then 14% of you all voted for other, which includes the Nintendo, Super Nintendo, Nintendo 64, Wii U tablet, the Wii U Pro controller, all of those. And then you have 6% for the Wii Remote, and then only 5% for Joy-Cons. Yeah, surprisingly, the Joy-Cons are in last place here, but I think one of the reasons for that is because people choose to play with the Switch Pro instead if they want that more standard-like controller. The Joy-Cons are really best whenever you're in that handheld form factor. But yeah, the Switch Pro comes away as the winner here, beating out the legendary GameCube controller. Even then, though, I think I'm really impressed with how well the GameCube controller did in the results here. Just like I said earlier this week with the Xbox 360 controller, the fact that it did get a large portion of the votes here, I mean, it shows you just how beloved this controller is, and that's a true testament to how good this controller was designed all of those years ago. I mean, people still choose to play with this controller. You see it happen in Smash Brothers all the time, where people, they just swear by the GameCube controller, and there's a good reason for that. It's a great, fantastic design. At the same time, though, the Switch Pro is an excellent controller. It's a little bit more modern, it's got great battery life, and it's extremely comfortable. Honestly, I really don't think that you can go wrong with either one of these controllers. They are both excellent in their own ways. Really, the only Nintendo controller that I just don't like personally is the Wiimote. Sorry for the 5% that voted for it, but I personally, I don't think it's very comfortable, and I was never really a fan of motion controls. I mean, if you like motion controls and everything, it did its job, and it was very innovative for its time. So I can completely understand why you'd vote for it. It just wasn't for me personally. Looking through the comments, though, I wanted to highlight Zero's comment here praising the Wii U gamepad. As they said, Wii U gamepad. The only bad thing for me was the battery life. Everything else was flawless in my opinion, and the utility offered was amazing. It made me want to never play a Zelda game without the gamepad again. Now, honestly, as much as that console failed, no, it wasn't particularly a big-time seller, but the Wii U pad ultimately was the first step in getting us to the Nintendo Switch. And the Wii U pad is actually, it's pretty comfortable. Even the analog sticks, they stick out a little further than the Joy-Cons, which gives you just a little bit more control. But I am with you here. It might not necessarily be my favorite, but definitely an underrated design. I feel the Wii U was better than what people realized at that time. I mean, if you think about it, a lot of the Switch's best sellers were actually Wii U games first. So, I mean, just kind of saying. Either way, though, that's it for this episode. But if you liked the video, don't forget to bell notification and subscribe button for more content just like this. Also, if you'd like to support the channel through Patreon, thank you for making this content possible. Peace out.